Dylan Harper and his two best friends seemed inseparable, the picture of teenage closeness in the quiet town of Crestwood, but behind Dylan's calm smile a dangerous obsession was brewing, one that would turn friendship into a nightmare no one saw coming. Everyone in the small town of Crestwood believed they knew Dylan Harper. At 17, he carried himself with an easy confidence that made him seem trustworthy and approachable. Teachers described him as attentive and diligent, rarely causing trouble in class. Neighbors smiled when they saw him helping his mother carry groceries or mowing the lawn without being asked. To the outside world, Dylan was the perfect teenager, the kind of young man parents were glad to have around their own children. Yet beneath that calm and carefully curated exterior, a darker side of Dylan was growing, one that no one could have imagined. It started slowly. Dylan kept notebooks filled with detailed observations about the people closest to him. He noted what they wore, where they went, and even their moods on certain days. At first, it seemed harmless, almost obsessive in a quiet, nerdy way. He claimed to himself it was just keeping track of his friends, wanting to be closer to them, to understand them better. But the notes were never innocent. They contained meticulous plans, hypothetical scenarios, and even imagined conversations that revealed his need to control everything around him. His obsession began to influence his daily life. He shadowed his friends, always staying just out of sight, learning their routines. He memorized the times they left for school, the streets they walked, and even which side of the road they preferred. To Dylan, these weren't just observations. They were data points building a map of everyone he felt connected to. Each line he wrote in his journal fed a growing conviction that if he could not control the people around him, he could control their fate. Even as Dylan maintained his friendly, polite image, cracks started to show. Friends occasionally noticed him appearing unexpectedly, sometimes at places they hadn't told him about. He would comment on details that only someone watching them closely could know, and although some found it flattering or amusing at first, others began to feel uneasy. His attentions were relentless, he gave gifts that were eerily specific, and he always seemed to know exactly what they were thinking or planning. The boundaries between friendship and control blurred, but Dylan never revealed the darkness lurking beneath his smile. Behind closed doors, Dylan's behavior became more extreme. He would spend hours revisiting his journals, cataloging each friend's vulnerabilities, and imagining how they might react in different situations. He sometimes practiced driving late at night, not just for fun but to perfect maneuvers in case his fantasies ever became real. The fantasies themselves grew darker over time, evolving from harmless imaginings to detailed scenarios in which he had complete power over others. Each page of his notebook was a step deeper into an obsession that no one could see coming. Despite all the warning signs hidden in plain sight, Dylan's friends and family remained largely unaware. He smiled, joked, and participated in school activities, leaving everyone to believe he was a normal teenager. Parents praised his responsibility, teachers complimented his attentiveness, and friends admired his dedication. No one imagined that behind the charm and politeness, a dangerous and calculating mind was meticulously planning, laying the groundwork for something unimaginable. By the time anyone would sense the threat, it would be far too late. As spring settled over Crestwood, subtle warning signs of Dylan Harper's dangerous obsession began to surface, though few recognized their significance at the time. Friends noticed little things, messages disappearing from group chats, sudden coldness when someone spoke to another friend, and occasional moments when Dylan seemed to appear out of nowhere. These incidents were brushed off as typical teenage quirks or misunderstandings. Parents and teachers attributed his intensity to adolescent hormones or a desire to be included. No one suspected that beneath these small behaviors, a pattern was forming, one that would escalate into something far more sinister. Dylan's jealousy grew quietly but steadily. He could not tolerate seeing his friends with anyone else, especially those he considered closest. Even minor interactions with new acquaintances sparked feelings of resentment and possessiveness. While others were unaware, Dylan's notebooks chronicled every detail: who his friends talked to, what they wore, how long they spent in different places, and even what they ate. Each entry became more analytical, resembling surveillance reports rather than teenage journaling. He cross-referenced locations and times, mapping routines with precision. What began as harmless curiosity had morphed into a full-blown obsession, one fueled by a need to dominate and control. In addition to his meticulous tracking, Dylan engaged in small acts that unsettled those around him. He would leave cryptic notes in his friends' lockers, sometimes praising them, sometimes criticizing them in ways that only he could explain. Items would go missing from backpacks or bedrooms, later appearing in places where only Dylan could have put them. Occasionally, friends would sense a presence while walking home, a fleeting shadow just out of reach. Some dismissed it as coincidence or imagination, but Dylan's actions were deliberate, carefully designed to instill a subtle sense of unease while maintaining his outward innocence. The obsession extended beyond mere surveillance. Dylan began practicing high-speed driving late at night, often imagining scenarios where he could manipulate events to his advantage. He considered every possibility, from minor accidents to dangerous confrontations, always calculating the best way to maintain control. His plans were detailed, precise, and increasingly dark. While no one could have predicted the extent of his intentions, the journals revealed an alarming progression from casual monitoring to premeditated planning. Each entry illustrated a mind consumed by control and the fantasy of dictating the lives of those around him. Despite these growing signs, Dylan maintained the perfect facade. At school, he remained polite and attentive, earning praise from teachers and peers alike. At home, he appeared loving and helpful, performing chores and volunteering for tasks without complaint. Friends continued to trust him, unaware that the behaviors they dismissed as quirks were in fact symptoms of a dangerous pattern. The duality of Dylan's life, a charming, seemingly ordinary teen on the surface and a calculating, obsessive planner underneath, made his actions nearly invisible. By the time the warning signs became undeniable, Dylan's obsession had escalated to a point where fantasy and reality blurred. The notebooks, the maps, and the meticulous observations were no longer just exercises in control, they were blueprints. Every detail of his friends' routines had been cataloged, every movement predicted, and every vulnerability noted. The stage was set, though no one yet understood how close they were to danger. What had started as a quiet fixation was building toward an irreversible act, one that would shock the town and reveal the terrifying extent of Dylan Harper's obsession. The night Dylan Harper had been planning for months arrived quietly, almost like any other evening in Crestwood, but everything had changed. The air was cool and the streets were mostly empty, giving him the perfect cover. For weeks, he had memorized the roads, the turns, and the timing of the few cars that might pass by. Every detail had been accounted for, every potential obstacle imagined and eliminated in his mind. He approached the plan with the same precision he had applied to his journals, mapping out every step to ensure nothing would go wrong. Earlier that day, Dylan had subtly manipulated his friends into going along with what seemed like a harmless outing. He suggested a secluded spot on the outskirts of town, framing it as an adventure, a chance to escape the monotony of school and social obligations. The friends, trusting him completely, agreed without hesitation. None of them suspected that the route he had chosen, the roads they were taking, or even the time of day had been meticulously calculated for a purpose that was horrifyingly clear to Dylan alone. As they drove, Dylan's composure never wavered. His hands gripped the steering wheel with an almost unnatural steadiness, his eyes scanning the road ahead with a focus that seemed more machine than human. Every turn he made had been rehearsed countless times in his mind, every inch of the road familiar from weeks of preparation. He anticipated the exact movements of his friends, predicting where they would step, when they might hesitate, and how they would react. The calmness in his demeanor made the moment all the more chilling. When the moment arrived, it was sudden and terrifying. In an instant, what had seemed like a simple drive became a calculated act of violence. Dylan accelerated with precision, aiming for his friends with a focus that left no room for error. The sound of the tires screeching against the asphalt echoed down the empty street. Chaos erupted as bystanders nearby screamed and scrambled, trying to intervene, but everything happened so quickly that there was almost no time to react. Within seconds, the plan Dylan had nurtured for months had reached its horrifying conclusion. The aftermath was immediate and devastating. Emergency responders arrived to find 2 lives shattered, lying on the road in a scene that seemed almost unreal in its brutality. The town, known for its quiet streets and safe neighborhoods, was thrown into shock and disbelief. How could someone so young, someone who appeared so ordinary, carry out such a calculated act? Investigators later revealed that Dylan had rehearsed every detail, including escape routes and contingencies, leaving behind no hesitation, no panic, and no remorse in the execution of his plan. Even as the emergency teams worked, Dylan's behavior remained eerily controlled. He did not panic, did not flee immediately, and did not cry out. Instead, he moved with the same deliberate precision he had exhibited throughout his preparations. The act was not impulsive. It was the result of months of obsession, careful planning, and a willingness to act on the darkest impulses he had cultivated in secret. The incident left the town reeling, with a reality settling in that the unthinkable had occurred, carried out by someone they had trusted completely. The investigation into the tragedy surrounding Dylan Harper revealed a depth of planning and obsession that stunned both law enforcement and the community. From the moment authorities arrived at the scene, it became clear that the incident was not a random act or a reckless accident. Every detail pointed to premeditation. Investigators combed through the area, examining tire marks, debris, and surveillance footage from nearby streets. Each piece of evidence reinforced a disturbing conclusion. Dylan had studied the location and timing, calculated the risks, and executed his plan with cold precision. As detectives delved deeper, the journals Dylan had kept came to light. Pages upon pages detailed his thoughts, observations, and plans in a manner that was almost clinical. He had meticulously documented the habits of his friends, noting their comings and goings, the people they associated with, and even their emotional vulnerabilities. These records were not scattered or disorganized. They were structured, coded, and thorough. Each entry reflected a mind consumed with control, capable of turning obsessive thoughts into a lethal strategy. For law enforcement, it was both chilling and methodical, a blueprint that showed how far he had taken his fixation. Interviews with classmates and neighbors painted a picture of a teenager who could mask his darker tendencies behind a charming and polite exterior. Dylan was described as cooperative and helpful, someone who rarely drew attention to himself in a negative way. Teachers recalled that he excelled academically and maintained a seemingly normal social life. This duality, the friendly, capable student on one hand and the calculating planner on the other, made it difficult for anyone to foresee the extent of his obsession. Psychologists later analyzed his behavior, noting traits consistent with psychopathy, lack of empathy, manipulativeness, superficial charm, and an absence of remorse. These traits explained how Dylan had been able to maintain such a convincing facade while secretly nurturing violent intentions. Digital evidence added another layer of understanding to Dylan's mindset. His phone and computer contained detailed maps, notes, and research on driving techniques, speed calculations, and escape routes. He had watched videos and read materials that would allow him to execute his plan with precision, carefully minimizing the chance of being stopped or caught in the moment. Investigators concluded that the combination of his journals and digital records proved the act was deliberate and methodical. Nothing in the evidence suggested impulsivity. Everything pointed to preparation and intent. As the investigation unfolded, the town struggled to reconcile the Dylan they thought they knew with the Dylan who had carried out such a horrific act. Parents of the victims, friends, and neighbors grappled with disbelief and grief, trying to understand how someone so close could turn into a threat so suddenly. The case became a focal point for discussions about the hidden dangers of obsessive behavior and the signs that often go unnoticed until it is too late. Law enforcement and psychologists alike emphasized the importance of recognizing early patterns of stalking, possessiveness, and control, warning that even seemingly harmless behavior can escalate in dangerous ways. The investigation ultimately revealed not just a crime, but the terrifying process by which a young mind could plan and carry out an act of violence against those closest to him. The meticulous preparation, the journals, the surveillance, and the digital research all painted a chilling portrait of a teenager whose obsession had transformed into calculated brutality. Crestwood, once a quiet and safe town, was left grappling with the haunting reality that evil sometimes hides in the most ordinary of faces, and that behind charm and normalcy, darkness can fester unseen for years. Dylan Harper's arrest sent shockwaves through Crestwood, leaving a town struggling to comprehend the events that had unfolded. Authorities charged him with multiple counts, including attempted murder and reckless endangerment, based on the meticulous evidence collected during the investigation. The legal process was long and intense, revealing the depth of his planning and obsession. Every journal, every map, and every digital record became crucial in proving premeditation. Prosecutors described Dylan's actions as deliberate and chilling, emphasizing the careful thought and preparation behind the attack. For the families of the victims, the aftermath was devastating. Grief, anger, and disbelief intertwined as they tried to process the sudden loss of trust and safety. Friends who had once felt secure in Dylan's company now struggled with betrayal, questioning every interaction they had shared. The small community, previously confident in its close-knit bonds, faced a profound reckoning, realizing that even familiar faces could conceal danger. The tragedy also sparked conversations about the warning signs of obsessive and manipulative behavior, with many reflecting on the subtle indicators they had overlooked or dismissed. Schools in Crestwood responded by implementing educational programs focused on recognizing patterns of unhealthy obsession and controlling behavior among peers. Teachers and counselors worked to educate students about boundaries, the dangers of stalking, and the importance of speaking up when they felt unsafe. Community workshops were held, emphasizing mental health awareness, early intervention, and the necessity of taking even small signs of obsessive behavior seriously. The hope was that these programs could prevent similar tragedies in the future by equipping young people and their families with knowledge and tools to respond effectively. Psychologists and criminologists studied Dylan's case as an example of how early obsession and controlling tendencies can escalate into violent behavior. They highlighted the importance of understanding psychopathic traits in adolescence, including superficial charm, lack of empathy, and meticulous planning. Experts noted that while Dylan's intelligence and outward friendliness masked his darker impulses, the warning signs were present and detectable if approached with awareness and caution. The case became a reference point for professionals seeking to identify and mitigate risks posed by individuals exhibiting similar patterns of behavior. As Dylan awaited trial, the community continued to grapple with the emotional fallout. Residents struggled to reconcile their memories of the polite, seemingly ordinary teenager with the reality of his actions. Conversations in homes, schools, and public spaces often revolved around questions of trust, vigilance, and the hidden dangers of obsessive behavior. The town slowly began the process of healing, though the scars remained. Families and friends focused on supporting each other, finding strength in shared grief, and emphasizing the importance of awareness and communication. Ultimately, Dylan Harper's case became more than a story of violence, it became a cautionary tale. It illustrated how appearances can be deceiving and how obsessive behavior, left unchecked, can escalate into tragedy. Crestwood learned that charm and normalcy can conceal danger and that even the most familiar faces may harbor unsettling darkness. The town's experience served as a reminder of the importance of vigilance, empathy, and intervention, highlighting the fine line between trust and caution and the devastating consequences when that line is crossed.